20.
I don't know, Mike.
Andrew Haddock, there's bagels here. Get offline and drive here now. You'll be in time. Hear why I got the bagels. He's not in there. It's too embarrassing.
I'm sorry, what was that, Sylvia?
You are why I bought the bagels instead of the cookies and grapes. There are fresh bagels and cream cheese sitting here and they're crying just for you.
I am so sorry. I just can't be in two places at once.
No, that nobody has fixed that, made that happen yet. Well, we're missing you because there are a pile of bagels over there.
Oh, well, I'm missing them.
Okay, we ready to get started?
Yeah, we can get started.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. It's a meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee of the Southern Hampshire Planning Commission, October 19, 2023, 9:33 a.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It looks like there's not a quorum. So information only, and everybody can introduce themselves. I'm Bruce Thomas, Town Engineer.
Tracy.
Tracy Whitehead, MTA Car.
Zach Swift with the commission. David Tilton with the commission.
Brendan McDowell, City of Manchester.
Nate Miller, staff with the commission.
Ben Herbert, staff of the commission and regional mobility manager for Region 8.
Sylvia.
Suzanne Lee Neighbor, staff of the commission.
Adam Lasnik, staff with the commission.
Sylvia Von Aulach with the commission.
And online, we have Matt W. Oh,
You just have to, right.
Good morning, everyone. Matt Watkins. I'm the MPO coordinator at Nashua Regional Planning Commission.
Lucy,
Lucy St. John. Good morning, everyone. New Hampshire DOT.
Suman,
So Mark Sunan, Town of New Boston.
Andrew,
Andrew Haddock, Town of Chester.
George. Hi, George.
Good morning.
George, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I did. Did you hear me? Oh, Joyce Harris, Secretary Planning Director. Good morning.
Yeah, you just have to unmute yourself.
Oh, hold on. Okay, sorry. Last night planning board meeting, a little tired this morning. Joyce Harris, Secretary Planning Director. Thank you, Sylvia.
Kristen,
Hi, Kristen Clark, City of Manchester Department of Public Works.
Greg,
I'm Craig Toss from Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission.
Tammy,
Tammy Zamoyski, staff of the commission.
Cameron,
Hi, good morning. Cam Perlman with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Ben,
Ben Bennett, Town of Londonderry, Town Planner.
and Audrey.
Audrey Bolak, HDR Engineering.
Craig Tufts.
Yeah. He introduced himself.
I think I already did. Hi, I'm Craig.
Thank you. Okay. Action on minutes from September 21st.
You're not gonna be able to do that.
I guess we can't do that until next time. So the first item on the new business is
Yeah.
Southern Hampshire Planning
Bruce,
fiscal year 2023 to 26 tip amendment number 3 by Nate Miller of the Southern Hampshire Planning Commission.
hey, Bruce, just before we do that, we did learn recently that one of our colleagues who came to a number of TAC meetings over the years from New Hampshire DES, Ricky DeCillo, we learned that he passed away earlier this month. And so we'd like to have a moment of silence for Ricky.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's have a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you. Would you proceed with that tip amendment number 3, Nate?
All right. I will attempt to share my screen the proper way. See if that works. Let's see. Can everybody online see this in full screen mode?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm gonna hide the floating meeting controls. Okay, so I just would like to take a few minutes to walk through tip amendment number 3. I'll talk a little bit more about the schedule. We have not released tip amendment number 3 yet. You're getting a sneak preview today of what's going to be in tip amendment number 3. But I show this slide every time we talk about a tip amendment or the 10-year plan, just to show, because a lot of these plans and programs sound the same and have similar names. We are talking today about the TIP, the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. That is a 4-year program. These are the projects that really constitute the first 4 years of the 10-year plan. These are the projects that are closest to construction. In a lot of cases, they're already under construction. And we're talking today about the 3rd amendment to our current TIP. So we're talking really only about projects in a 4-year window, and that 4-year window is fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2026. So as I mentioned, we are working with our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT as well as the 3 other MPOs in New Hampshire to prepare Amendment 3 to our TIP. There are a number of project additions and removals and timing adjustments and funding adjustments that we're going to talk about over the course of the next few minutes. Schedule-wise, we anticipate releasing TIP Amendment number 3 on Monday, November 6th. We'll hold a 10-day comment period. We'll close that comment period on Friday, November 17th. And then we will have a public hearing to consider adoption at the November 28th MPO meeting. So again, you're getting a sneak preview today of the project changes that will be in TIP Amendment number 3, but TIP Amendment number 3's actual release will be coming on November 6th. What are those projects? And that's what I'm going to spend the next few minutes kind of walking through. There is a local bridge project in Auburn, the rehabilitation of Griffin Mill Road over Maple Falls Brook. That project is actually going to be removed from the TIP. It's not being removed because the project is going away or the project's been canceled or anything along those lines. It's being removed from the TIP because the actual activity of this project is not going to take place until 2027. So for our TIP, again, we're focused on 2023 to 2026. The things that are going to be happening beyond 2026 are not included within the TIP window, and this project is going to happen in 2027. So it's being removed from the TIP for that reason. Bedford 40664. This is the widening of Route 3 from Hawthorne Drive North to the Manchester Airport Access Road, Raymond Wazorek Drive. Originally scheduled to start construction in fiscal 2026. They are working on the engineering phase work related to that project, but based on the current schedule, it's likely that that project is going to begin construction in 2027 instead of 2026. So the construction phase funding is moving out of the TIP because it's going to start the year after this current TIP period. Engineering and right-of-way work is going to continue as scheduled in the current TIP. It's just that first year of construction is likely going to move beyond the TIP window. Bedford Merrimack 16100. This is the conversion of the Bedford Mainline Toll Plaza on the F.E. Everett Turnpike from its current configuration to all electronic tolling. This project is seeing additional engineering work in fiscal year 2024, and then instead of starting construction in fiscal 23, that construction is going to begin at the tail end of 2024 and continue through 2026. So about a 1-year delay in construction. These changes reflect the actual progress to date on the project. Some additional engineering work is needed. We also recognize that we talked last month about the fiscal constraint challenges on the turnpike system. So that any projects on the turnpike system are supposed to be self-sufficient with the turnpike revenues that are generated from tolling. We know that COVID-related traffic shifts are continuing. They're not quite back to where they were yet in terms of toll revenue pre-pandemic, although they're fairly close. But because of the inflationary environment and those toll revenue challenges, a lot of the turnpike projects are seeing delays. And this one is close to construction, but it's still seeing a delay of a year. Derry Londonderry, this is exit 4A, the C project of exit 4A, which is the construction of Sinead Road all the way to the 102 intersection. This is actually technically seeing a reduction in funding for the construction phase work in the TIP. And the reason for that is that this project is now anticipated to continue into construction and be completed in 2027. So a portion of the construction phase funding is slipping beyond the TIP window. And so they're reallocating a portion of the fiscal 25 and 26 construction funding for that purpose. Goffstown 41597. This is a new project in our TIP. It is a local bridge project, the replacement of a bridge on Center Street over Harry Brook. This was not previously in the TIP, but is now going to have federal funding, Surface Transportation Block Grant funding, programmed for construction phase work. And anytime federal funding is programmed for a project in our region, it needs to be included in our TIP. So now this Goffstown project is going to be in our TIP because of the inclusion of federal funding. Hooksett 29611. This is the reconstruction and widening of Route 3 from Route 27 to Alice Avenue. Bruce and I are both on the project committee for that project. Engineering work is continuing. I think there's a public meeting. What is it, next Tuesday, Bruce? In Hooksett to present alternatives and hear public feedback on design alternatives. This is one where, again, the construction funding was originally programmed to start in fiscal 26. Work is continuing on the engineering and right-of-way phase work related to the project, but now it's believed that construction is likely going to start in 2027 rather than 26. So that portion of construction phase funding is going beyond the TIP period.
Can I just point out something about that? There's actually a benefit to that because the Hacker Hill Road project, which is on the other side of the river, is going to go in 25 and 24 and 25, 25 and 26 probably.
Yeah.
So it's going to go. There's not going to be a conflict.
It's good in terms of phasing with the different projects that are happening in the town of Hooksett.
Yeah. In with the.
Do we know what the design is going to be yet for the Hackett Hill project?
What's that?
Do we know what the design is going to be for the Hackett Hill project?
No, the engineering study contract was literally just signed last week. So we're not predicting, but well, we're not going to assume any design. Figured out scientifically.
Yeah. Manchester 16099. This is the engineering and right-of-way phase work for the construction of I-293 exit 6 and 7. We know in the current 10-year plan, the actual work to do the construction of exit 6 and 7 is getting delayed again. I think to 2032 and 2034 respectively. So we know that because of those turnpike issues that we just talked about and the toll revenue models in the context of inflation, that is one of the projects that's getting delayed, exit 6 and 7, unfortunately. However, the engineering and right-of-way phase work is going to continue in the interim. And so the TIP amendment here is actually adding engineering phase funding in fiscal 25 and 26. They will continue developing the project design and proceeding towards the eventual construction of the project. So that's good news that they're not putting a complete pause on engineering activities and are programming engineering accordingly in the next couple of years. So hopefully that project continues to progress, notwithstanding the fact that the actual construction of exit 6 and 7 has been delayed in the 10-year plan. Nashua Merrimack Bedford, whenever you see that code, Nashua Merrimack Bedford relates to the expansion of the FE Everett Turnpike. Part of that, the northern part of that project is already happening. You can drive through there on the Bedford side of the FE Everett. The overall project will go all the way to exit 8 in Nashua. This is adding engineering phase funding in 24 to 26 and right-of-way phase funding in 24 to 26. Part of the reason for that is that the completion of the entire project, particularly one of the component projects in the town of Merrimack, is being extended 3 years to the completion. So originally, I think it was the whole project was targeted to be complete by 2028. Now the whole project is targeted to be complete by 2031. So there's a 3-year delay in the expected completion of that project. And I think part of that means that they're programming 3 additional years of PE and right-of-way funding to account for that amended timeline. There was a standalone project for NEVI program charging. This is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. It's federal funding that comes into New Hampshire for that specific purpose of EV charging. They had this project 44093 that was a standalone project. That project will be removed from the TIP, and all NEVI activities will be under the umbrella of a new statewide program that they're going to call EV Infra. So instead of one particular project, this project just becomes a child of a statewide program that encompasses all of the NEVI related electric vehicle infrastructure. So you have the removal of this one, but on the next slide, you have the establishment of this new program. So we're going to add the new EV infra program into the TIP to encompass all of those NEVI activities. There is actually, I think DOT just in the last couple of days has released its request for proposals for NEVI charging stations. So that is out on the street. I think they're having a webinar for interested respondents early next week. I think I'd have to go back and look at that, but NEVI activities are proceeding quickly at DOT. The FLAP program, which is actually the Federal Lands Access Program. This is a statewide funding program that deals with roads that access federal lands. They are adding, we carry it in our TIP because theoretically there's one road in the region that accesses the Everett Dam and Ware that technically is eligible for FLAP funding. It's not one of the projects occurring in the coming years, but because we are eligible under the program and it's a statewide program, we carry this project in our TIP. They are adding engineering, construction, and other phase funding in fiscal 24. The other phase funding is actually for a road safety audit on New Hampshire 12A in the town of Cornish near the St. Gaudens National Historic Site. I put that in here because it's one of the prettiest places I have ever been to in New Hampshire. And if you ever have the chance to go there, it is a wonderful place to go and visit. The FTA 5307 statewide program, this is for DOT programmed projects only in the Boston urbanized area. It's actually reducing the fiscal 23 to 26 programmed funding. That is to reflect some guidance from the Federal Transit Administration that the STIP for that program should only include what are called anticipated funding obligations. And the biggest part of that is that American Rescue Plan FTA funding that had previously been incorporated into that program. The guidance is that should be removed because those funds have already been obligated. So on paper, it's going to look like a substantial reduction. It's not really a substantial reduction. It's just taking out the ARP funds that have already been obligated. The FTA 5310 statewide program. This is for seniors and transit services and mobility management for seniors and individuals with disabilities. It's seeing an increase in programmed funding. And the reason for that is to reflect the anticipated 5310 revenues coming into the state, as well as what they expect funding obligations to be. So same story for another FTA program, the 5339 program. 5339 is a capital program for the purchase of buses and bus facilities. So it's capital in terms of rolling stock and actual, bus terminals and bus facilities. This is also seeing an increase in programmed funding based on the anticipated FTA 5339 revenues and funding obligations in the state. There is a program that exists just to document a transfer that occurs, a transfer between federal highway funds and federal transit funds. It's listed here as STBG to FTA. So a little over $3 million per year is transferred from the state's Federal Highway Administration formula funding through the Surface Transportation Block Grant to FTA purposes. And those FTA purposes benefit the 5307 providers like Manchester Transit Authority. It helps to support the 5310 activities around the state, like the mobility management. It serves a number of different purposes. The only thing that they're changing here is basically the match structure between the non-federal and federal portion of the funding, and that's simply to be more accurate. They fund a lot of different elements of transit activities through that program. Some of those are operating that require a 50% match. Some of those are capital that require a 20% match. Some of those are mobility management that they match with their own toll credits. So there's a lot of different match components that are blended together, and they're simply making a tweak here to be more accurate in the non-federal share of that project. Not that anything significant is changing with it. The Transportation Alternatives Program is seeing a fairly substantial increase in engineering, right-of-way, and construction phase funding. It's not necessarily that's all new funding. It's simply documenting that carryover funding is now being incorporated into that program. They've had carryover funding from previous years that wasn't completely obligated in the TAP program. That's now being programmed in these STIP years, and those carryover funds are necessary to complete the projects that are committed in the program. So you'll see it looks like a substantial increase, but the reason for that is simply carryover funding being appropriately documented in the STIP. There's a new statewide program, TRAFMON. It's for statewide traffic monitoring. It will begin this year in fiscal year 24. It will encompass all traffic monitoring activities, traditional traffic monitoring activities. So the loop detectors that you see on the interstate and on ramps, the piezoelectric sensors, the WIM, what we call WIM, weigh in motion. There's a few of those around the state that weigh vehicles in motion as they're traveling at speed for truck regulation purposes, and the calibration of those WIM machines will be included here, and a variety of other factors. So it's just sort of cleaning things up and putting all of those traffic monitoring expenses under the umbrella of one program. There's a new standalone project that will cover what are called 4R projects. If you're not familiar with the term 4R, it refers to resurfacing, restoration, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. It is a term most often used to describe interstate improvement projects. This particular project is scoped as the entire national highway system, which would include all of the interstates, but also includes other principal arterial roads, like in our region. Route 101 is an NHS road. Route 3 is an NHS road. So this particular project is a statewide 4R project, scoped a little bit more broadly than just the interstate system. It's scoped to encompass the national highway system writ large. There's no construction. We don't really know what the child projects will be funded out of this program or out of this project yet. But engineering and right-of-way phase funding is being programmed in fiscal 26. For these 4R activities. In the town of Ware, there is a project to replace River Road's bridge over the Piscataquag River. This is a very old project number, 14338. This project has been around a long time. It has seen a few different iterations. It now looks like it's headed towards the finish line quickly. The project's being added to the TIP. We now have construction anticipated to occur in fiscal 25 and 26. And there's federal funding now associated with the project, just like what we talked about in Goffstown. There's STBG funding now associated with this bridge. So we carry it in the tip for that reason. I think this is the last project, Wyndham 40663. It's the corridor engineering study of 111 from Wall Street to London Bridge Road. We're adding this project to the tip. It is not a new project. You may have seen this project before. It was in the 10-year plan back as recently as the 2019 to 2028 10-year plan, which is 3 cycles ago now. It was put on pause and it now has been resuscitated and is moving forward. The project is now underway and is expected to be complete during fiscal 25. So it's a new appearance of a project that's been around for a little while. That is it. And I thank all of you for bearing with me. That was some extremely dry material, and you all did well. Thank you. I will stop sharing and answer any questions.
We have one question in the chat, Nate, from Mark. He would like to know if the TIP amendment states how much funding the TRAFMON program is getting.
Good question, Mark. I happen to have that right here, and I can give you that answer. $2 million per year, starting in fiscal 24. So 2 million in fiscal 24, 2 million in fiscal 25, 2 million in fiscal 26.
Okay, I'm guessing that's going to be light, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
What's the timeline on the amendment?
So we're going to put it out Monday, November 6th for a 10-day comment period ending November 17th, which is a Friday. And then we will consider it for adoption at a public hearing on November 28th.
Okay. I think we're gonna have a raise change, but I think it'll be after that.
Okay.
So we'll work with you.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Right, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Next on the agenda, equity analysis, regional transportation investments with Suzanne Ninnebaugh and Zach Swick, Southern New Hampshire Planning.
Hey. All right. So I'm gonna do my best to share the screen with PowerPoint, which is not my usual way. Tammy, can you tell me if that's visible?
Perfect.
Awesome.
Great job.
Woo! Hide the video panel. No, I did the wrong one. I want to
Show video panel.
show the video panel, and I want to hide floating meeting controls. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for being here this morning and joining us online. Zach and I are going to talk to you today about some work we've been doing on an equity analysis for the region. This is actually building upon a prior phase of work that Zach reported on probably a little over a year ago. Today's focus is going to be on regional transportation investments and understanding how they're distributed. So basically 4 key parts. I'll give a little bit of an overview up top about why do we care about transportation equity? Why are we analyzing it? How are we doing it? I'll give a very high level overview of the work that was done about a year ago and was published about a year ago. And then Zach's going to really dig into the nitty gritty of the presentation and talk about the analysis of transportation investments in our region. And then we'll sum up some key takeaways and next steps for future work. So analyzing transportation equity. I pulled in a definition from Federal Highway here that transportation equity is about fairness and mobility and accessibility to meet the needs of all community members. And they allude to the importance of affordability, reliability, access to social and economic opportunity. And I think it's really important to note that it's also about being responsive to unique community needs. I found this great graphic from the city of Fort Collins, Colorado. This is not about giving every community exactly the same thing. As you see in the picture up front, you give everybody the exact same bicycle, not everyone's going to be able to make use of it. Equity is really about tailoring solutions to the needs of our communities and the folks we're serving in our region. I will say there, you know, this is coming in and digging into this with Zach. I learned quickly, there is no boilerplate, you know, plug and play approach to doing an equity analysis. This top report that you see here from the Transportation Research Board provides a pretty good guide of how to tackle a big picture equity analysis. I also looked for, you know, who's done a really great job, and I found a really comprehensive version out of the Bay Area, biting off way more than we could ever chew. But by looking at something that was done really well, we were able to kind of glean, well, what's achievable for us at this moment in time. Understanding equity and transportation planning in our region is going to be an ongoing process. You know, the data will change over time. Our research questions will continue to evolve, but it's something that's really important. In large part, proactive analysis of how we're addressing equity concerns helps us adhere to federal funding requirements, right? Through Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, through a variety of executive orders, we need to be making sure that we are understanding and addressing and mitigating any potential negative impacts that are associated with our work. So this cover may look familiar to you. You probably saw a presentation on it about a year ago, but I thought it'd be helpful to do a big picture overview. This report did a few things that were really important. Great demographic analysis of the kind of key populations in our region. It helped us define our region's equity area, and it started to unpack some key needs and concerns that we might want to consider. I'll walk through each of these. So Zach basically looked at each census tract in our region and assessed key populations and how they were distributed. So we looked at 6 main groups. The first 3 are federally protected classes. We're legally obligated to address the needs of racial and ethnic minorities, people living below the poverty line, and also people with limited English proficiency. The team also really wanted to look at, well, what are other vulnerable groups in our region that may be more likely to have mobility challenges and that are tracked via the census? And some key groups that stood out would be seniors, people ages 65 and older, people with disabilities, and people reporting that they live in a household without a vehicle, so no vehicle households. And here's just one example of the distribution of racial and ethnic minorities in the region. And then in order to kind of get closer to understanding, well, what is our equity area? The team developed a scoring process, a scoring rubric, and looked at all of these community groups and analyzed which census tracts saw higher levels or one standard deviation above the mean for the region, and then assigned points accordingly. So those groups that are members of federally protected classes that were at 1 standard deviation above the mean got 2 points. The other groups that I listed, seniors, disabilities, no vehicle households, got 1 point. And for those of you like me who haven't really thought about math in about 20 years, I looked for a cute graphic, tried to I'm a visual person. I wanted to understand standard deviation. So you can see that middle line is the mean of a particular variable in our region. Standard deviation is the measure of, you know, what is the variability statistically above that. And the threshold required to receive a point in this exercise would be like in that top tier, that top tail of the curve. So if we take one example here, limited English proficiency. The mean for our region as a whole is 5% of the population has limited English proficiency. The scoring threshold, a census tract would have to have 12% to get a point. And the highest score in our region, I was really surprised. There's actually a census tract with 43% of the population with limited English proficiency. So then if you take a look at, you know, the region as a whole, about 24 census tracts received at least 1 point. The vast majority of the census tracts were in Manchester. We also saw scores from Goffstown, Bedford, and Londonderry, specifically for having higher senior populations compared to the rest of the region. But if we wanted to set like a minimum standard for what constitutes the equity area. So we said you need to have 4 points to kind of be qualified for the equity area. And with that, we got our map, right? So these census tracts is about a dozen census tracts in central Manchester. They happen to be contiguous. That was not, they don't have to be, but in our case, they were. These areas, these 12 census tracts comprise our equity area. So what you know from this, number one, this is the geographic baseline for how we're going to calculate a kind of additional equity analyses that Zach's going to talk about. And it's also an area that we specifically want to target in terms of prioritizing transportation equity issues. Just a snapshot of needs and concerns. You can kind of go back to the report if you want to dig in further. But one thing we're seeing is that this particular equity area is experiencing a lot more vehicle miles traveled as compared to the rest of the region. Some of that makes sense in terms of density, but also this is an area where people are much less likely to own vehicles compared to the rest of the region. So they're experiencing the impacts of traffic. And you see an example here, their experience of transportation noise specifically is much, much higher compared to the rest of the region. Also, kind of the needs and concerns are different in terms of safety. Outside of the equity area, safety concerns are much more associated with motorized crashes. Within the equity area, we have a much higher concern related to fatal bike head crashes. So different concerns, different solutions. It's just something to keep in mind as we kind of move forward in our equity work. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zach. Do you want me to click through or do you want to switch?
Or is the mouse, does the
Oh,
mouse
yeah.
work?
Let me see. Oh, it does work. Here you go.
Other way. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how we tried to look at our regional investments in the region. It's actually really useful that Nate presented today because he was talking about the TIP and the whole process. So for this, we decided to look at our 2021 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is our largest federally required transportation document, which highlights all the planned projects in our region that have federal funds. And so in there, this is what we put together in 2021. There's 139 projects. Of that, 55 are in the TIP, another 61 are in the 10-year plan, and then 88 are in the out years. Those are the ones that are 15 years or more, 10 or more years out. So together, this represents over $1 billion in 2021 dollars for spending between 2021 and 2045. So just keep in mind, this is not insignificant money we're talking about. We tried to break down the projects into natural categories so we could and analyze them. We came up with 5. First is bike and pedestrian, which is there's about 63 million in there. Then there's debt service, which can be for anything, but in our case, all our debt service is for the interstate system expansion. And then we had a highway and bridge. And for that, keep in mind that highway here is highway and DOT speak, meaning not the interstate, but any public road. And that we split up into 2 separate categories for, limited access expressway, 101 east of Manchester, the interstate, that sort of thing. And then non-limited access expressway. So Dubuque Street. Then we broke it into studies because we do have a couple of transportation studies going through, and then finally transit. And it was also important to break up the projects into 2 different classes. We carry everything in our MTP, but a lot of it we have 0 control over. So we broke it into 2 categories. One, the MPO control projects. These are the small local projects, the 10-year plan, the TIP, that sort of thing. The TAP. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's either controlled by the state or that we funnel through to transit providers and we don't really have any say over. And so that would be, paving the Central Turnpike or, constructing a noise barrier along the highway. We really have no say over any of that. Projects were then defined as 3 different types of geographic entities versus point. And so point would be something like, bus stops. It would be a good example of a point. Then line is, a road project, something like that. An intersection and polygons are, surface areas. So if a service is provided in these different towns, we don't know exactly where, so we'll just do all the towns. And keep in mind for all these, there's about a 200-foot buffer zone where we capture things within that, because it helps deal with just some of the imprecision in the GIS data, and also just some kind of the ambiguity about project influence. So there are a couple of really big caveats we have to touch on before this. First is that in this within this analysis, costs across a project are equally distributed, when in reality they're not. So if you're building a highway and you have a stretch of it, and then you have a stretch where you have a couple of bridges. The section with the bridges is going to be way more expensive than the rest of the project, but we don't know that. We can't know that for a lot of these projects. A lot of these projects aren't defined like that, so we just have to do it, kind of flat across the board. Second, projects can affect people that are not immediately near them. If I live 5 miles from a major highway project that is constructed, I might not be right near it, but now my commute is 10 minutes shorter. It's influenced me. So we don't really have a good way to treat that. Third is the MTP is a snapshot in time. Plans change, just as we saw today. Things get pulled out, things get delayed, things get, funding changed. This is a snapshot of basically what we were thinking next set of projects were going to look like in the winter of 2020. So I think we all say that things changed since then. And lastly, this is probably most important. This is only looking at total dollars invested and not whether it is a wise, needed, best used, or adequate investment. It's just saying we spent this money here. It's not looking at benefits or harms. If I wake up tomorrow and they built a 10-lane highway outside my window, you say, Zach, look, we've invested all this money in your neighborhood. Isn't that great? Well, that's not great for me. That's not an investment to me. We're going to have to deal with that at some point. We didn't deal with it in this iteration just because it is so complicated. Okay, let's get to the actual projects themselves. Within our region, there's about, like I said, there's over $1 billion worth of projects. The blue column on the left is all the MTP projects in our region. The one in green on the right are the ones that we actually have control over. So you can see there's $1 billion plus in our region, and the ones we have control over is about 290 million. So still not nothing. Some of them you can also see that like stuff like bike and pedestrian, it's the same for both because the bike and pedestrian funding that comes through us is done by the commission. It's not typically done by DOT. Another thing to note is debt service is obviously in the MTP, but it's not in anything that we have any control over. Same with the limited expressway. We don't have any say over how the turnpike system is run. So key takeaways: debt service makes up 20% of the MPP funding. Limited access expressway makes up 56 of the MTP's funding. And keep in mind, this doesn't include the vast majority of the I-93 expansion. Most, I'd say 95% of that would have been caught in a previous MTP. So all this together, more than 3/4 of the funding in our total MTP goes towards limited access expressway projects or paying down the debt on their construction. Okay, so we want to compare the equity area to the rest of the region. And so we can do that. We can do a stamp and see where the projects fall. Well, how exactly do we want to do that? We want to look at overall dollars. Well, the overall region outside the equity area is much larger. So the value you can see there is going to be much higher. If we look at just at the density within this area, well, then the equity area is going to be much higher because it's a much smaller area where it has a lot of transportation infrastructure. So we decided to do it by per capita. So you can see that the equity area there, we have about $3,300 per person in the equity area. And the rest of the region is about $3,900. So that's a little bit higher, but we're talking about an analysis with huge margins of error and assumptions. So for in our terms, that's pretty close. That's pretty equivalent. What's that look like though at a project level? Okay, so on the right, again, the blue is all the MTP projects, but then we have the equity area and the rest of the region. And on the right, we have the MPO controlled projects with the equity area and the rest of the region. And you can see they're relatively close on for all the MTP projects. And if we look on the right in the green, they're very close for the MPO controlled projects. Have about 1,100 and 1,000. So pretty close. But they're not close when you look at some of the different sub projects. So bicycle and pedestrian is obviously much higher inside the equity area. There's no debt service inside the equity area because that all is in this case is serving 93, and none of that project took place in the equity area. Highway and bridge is pretty close for all MTP projects. But if we look at MPO control, it's about twice as much outside the region. Also, study is higher for outside the region, just happens to be the way it is. And but transit is for the MPO controlled side is about let's see, 3 times higher inside the equity area than it is outside, which is what you would expect. And again, for limited access expressway, it follows what is up above in the highway and bridge, just because we don't carry any other non-limit, or we don't carry any limited access expressways in a region. So this is just a graph showing exactly the same thing. Here we have on the right is on the left is the MTP projects, all of them, and on the right is the MPO, all the MPO controlled ones. So you can see, bike and pedestrian there is much higher. Highway and bridge is much lower. Transit a little bit higher, and there's no study. One thing we did notice when we broke it down into smaller categories like the TIP or the 10-year plan is that for the 10-year plan, the MPO controlled projects are much lower than the rest of the region. Now, that might just be a blip in time because, like we said, things change. It's only looking at 10 years, which seems like a long time, but for transportation planning and projects actually isn't that long. And so going forward in the future, we're going to need to keep an eye on that because it could be something, could not. We also want to make sure that we keep an eye on this to make sure that MTP projects in the out years are making it into the 10-year planning process. And I think you're on.
Oh, okay. So just to reiterate, because there was a lot of numbers thrown at us, I was kind of wanted to sum up some key takeaways. Thank you, Zach, for doing all the hard work on that analysis. So key takeaways. The MTP reveals a relatively equal distribution of transportation investments in our region, right? Like even though these numbers are blunt, we're seeing that they're relatively equal between the equity area and the rest of the region. It means that, we're starting from a fairly good baseline. There's always room to make improvements, but we can hopefully build upon what's working. Number 2, there are important variations based upon project categories. Like we saw, things like bike ped infrastructure, transit is getting more investment in the equity area, and that's actually a very good thing because those transportation options are really important for maximizing mobility options for people who say don't have a car or can't drive for some reason. Since this report reflects a snapshot in time, again, ongoing analysis is going to be really important. We want to see how these investment trends change over time. This is a moment, it's a blip on the screen. So it's giving us some information, but it's not the full picture, and we want to keep watching. And then finally, the next phase of this work will require a closer look at project benefits and harms. So, like the example Zach gave with the highway, the 10-lane highway outside his window, we do want to have a better understanding of who's benefiting and who might be experiencing some negative unintended consequences of different projects. That's going to require higher levels of community engagement to really understand what's important to community members in the equity area, what harms are most troubling to them. And so this is a much bigger next step that we'll need to take in the coming years, and it's something that we will kind of map out a plan to work on together. So I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Stop sharing.
Okay. Any questions? I think it's a question.
Mm-hmm.
On the bike ped part, I don't know if you can go back, sorry.
Sure.
To the presentation.
Sure. Just a sec.
But
You might need to speak up a little bit.
The bike ped.
yeah, on the bike ped, so you had the numbers, like the population density difference in the equity area, and then the bike ped projects sort of reflected that, but I'm wondering, like, are you going to take any closer analysis of that specific?
What do you mean in closer analysis?
Just to see, like, so you can see the bike ped in the MPO controlled part is like close to 600, and then it's about 150 in the other. And I'm just wondering the relationship between the population density in the equity area and maybe trying to get an idea of the number of people who walk and bike within that area, in and out of that area, sort of, if you dug into that, if that makes any sense. And I'm seeing your blank face.
We haven't dug into it.
In terms of like whether it's, adequate.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, no, this is just looking at, we're comparing. One thing about equity that, that you need to say is doing equivalent or even doing more is not necessarily enough. You have to do the actual adequate amount. That is not what we're looking at here. That is what we would look at in the next
phase.
the next phase.
This is just money.
Yeah, this is just because this is we're tracking the easy stuff. This is easy to do. Figuring out whether service is adequate, whether it's calculating harms and benefits. We pushed it off because frankly, it's hard to do. We don't have a good way to do it, and most people don't. Everybody at this point is in the same boat, trying to kind of figure this out for themselves.
I guess I could see that we would like increase our traffic counts and our bike ped counts within the equity area and maybe just outside the equity area, just to see like the amount of traveling going in and out, especially the bike ped.
Yeah, I mean, everything is open right now.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. I especially liked your graph, Suzanne, on the
Standard deviation?
Yes, I really thought that was great.
I'm glad that was helpful. I always look for the graphic that has like a cute cartoon, because I know I can probably understand it. Let's see, the question from Ben Bennett, why were statistics below the mean considered?
So because those are areas that would then have lower levels of those populations.
The vulnerable.
Of the vulnerable populations. And this is looking at access to the vulnerable populations. Are there any other questions in the room?
I just have one comment. So I think you got to be careful that definitely not all of the projects that would help people in those equity areas have to be in the equity area. I'll give you one big example. Suppose somebody who wants to live in Manchester, want to work in Londonderry, those rail trails, that rail trail that hasn't been built yet. I mean, that would be a perfect way for those folks to get to work in Londonderry without having a car or anything. So just to think everything's within the equity areas, really not necessarily viable.
Yeah, no, that's a major limitation.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't know how to solve that. And I have not seen in the, the geographic, the geospatial analysis, a good way to solve that problem. Because you'd have to basically know, how people interact with different projects and all sorts of things, and at what distance, does it become useful and what distance does it not? It's a much harder problem.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Next up, mobility management review, Benjamin Hebert, mobility manager from Southern Hampshire Planning Commission.
Right. Is this full screen online?
Yes, it is. Good job.
Sweet, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Herbert. I am the Regional Mobility Manager for Region 8, which is the Greater Manchester, Derry, and Salem area. I took on this role a little over a year ago in August 2022, and I figured I would present to everybody a year in review of the work that I've done and the work that has benefited the region that I serve. It wouldn't be my presentation if it didn't have flashy graphics and animations. Anyways, just some background on Mobility Management Network. There's 8 regions throughout the state, each with a dedicated regional mobility manager. And mobility managers work with the regional coordinating council for each region.
These councils are made up of planning staff, transportation staff, local representatives, and community members, as well as social service organizations. And the region I serve is Region 8, which is the greater Manchester, Derry, and Salem area. It's similar to the SNHPC region, except that Francistown is a part of Region 5 and not my region. And I also serve the towns of Raymond, Sandown, Danville, Hampstead, Atkinson, Plastow, and Salem. Just some information on what exactly is mobility management. I tend to break it down into 3 different talking points. First is a champion for community transportation. A lot of my work involves promoting the transit services that exist within my region, as well as working with transit agencies on getting the word out to help their ridership and increase awareness. I'm also a network builder. Even though I'm working with transit agencies, I'm also working with organizations that represent individuals who are limited to transportation access. And also, I would define myself as a social worker for transportation, because I also work directly with disadvantaged populations who don't have access to transportation, populations being older adults, individuals with disabilities, low incomes, immigrants and refugees, or anybody who's unable to drive themselves. Veterans as well. So just to go over the accomplishments that have been made in this past year involving being a champion for community transportation. I gave our regional directory of transit resources its first update in 6 years. This directory was it highlights 26 transit services throughout the region. And it provides information for 20 communities. And when I say that, I mean that it goes through each community within the region, and then it lists all the services. And with each service, it talks about if there's fares, if it's wheelchair accessible, what their schedule is, and contact information, and everything that's needed to be known about that service. And this whole thing is available online on our website. I've also distributed a lot of different outreach materials that promote both transportation services as well as mobility management. These include a quarterly newsletter that goes out every 3 months that highlight my work and also highlights transit services in the region. This also includes brochures, posters, and flyers as well. I didn't have enough space on the slide to include this, but I also recently came up with a bunch of magnets that highlight mobility management, and I put some out for display over there if anybody wants to check it out. This month is also Community Transportation Month, where we're celebrating community transportation services throughout the state of New Hampshire. So we've also got pins and stickers for that over there as well. Thank you, Tracy, for bringing those in. In total, I've distributed about over 400 of these materials just in this past year. I've also done a lot of work updating web resources throughout the region. This includes our own website, which I've done work on creating pages and updating pages that involve any sort of transportation related content. I implemented a new feature called I Need a Ride, where people can go in and sort of fill out a form that goes my way, requesting help finding transportation. This is for people who either don't know how to reach me by phone or don't like making phone calls. And then also, I've been working with local municipalities throughout the region on how we can update their websites that highlight transit services as well. And one of the things that mobility managers track throughout the state is new riders for services in the region, specifically those that receive FTA 5310 funding. In my region, these are 6 services, including Caregivers, a volunteer driver program based in the greater Manchester area, CART, demand response service that serves Chester, Derry, Hampstead, Londonderry, and Salem, Easter Seals, demand response service for seniors and disabled people based in Manchester, MTA's free shuttle service, which serves New Boston, Goffstown, and Hooksett, as well as MTA's paratransit service in Rockingham Meals on Wheels, which has senior demand response transportation in parts of Rockingham County. And in the fiscal year of 2023, there were 479 new riders logged across these 6 services. And as we move forward, we're going to use this as a baseline number and see if there's increases in new ridership based on the work that mobility managers have been doing around the state. Moving on, I'll talk about my accomplishments as a network builder. In terms of connections, I'm making them with obviously transportation providers, but also senior centers and librarians, where libraries have become sort of a hub for distributing transit-related outreach materials. Human service organizations, those that represent disadvantaged populations, local municipal staff, mainly with updating their website content and also distributing outreach materials as well, and health organizations, because a lot of people that need help finding rides need them to medical appointments. These are some of the examples of connections and partnerships I've been making. I've worked a lot with CART on working with them on outreach materials and going to outreach events and promoting their service. I do a lot of work with NHAHA, which is the New Hampshire Alliance for Healthy Aging. My work with the Department of Health and Human Services involves TANF counselors, TANF being temporary assistance for needy families. Wellness Link, which is also based in Concord and is a senior resource database that launched just last month. I had the opportunity to get in contact with staffers for Senator Jean Shaheen's office because they also receive a lot of inquiries and calls with people who have difficulties finding transportation. And they were very pleased to see the work that mobility management is doing throughout the state. And they were happy that I was able to provide them resources with mobility management. And they also were able to get in touch with our statewide mobility manager. Hand in Hand Senior Center, based in Ware. They've been working with me and Sylvia for the past month and a half, trying to find ways to address transportation needs for their seniors. And then immigrant and refugee groups such as Victory Women of Vision and Welcoming New Hampshire. Specifically Victory Women of Vision, where we had the opportunity to attend a listening session back in June, where older adults who are women and refugees had the opportunity to voice their issues and experiences of aging in New Hampshire and the challenges that come with it. I throw this on a map. This is what 33 connections and partnerships looks like. I made those that are both within the region and outside of the region as well. Moving on, just to highlight the work I've done as a social worker for transportation. Between July of last year and October of this year, I've assisted 49 individuals with finding transportation. And medical appointments was the most common purpose of their trips, being at 40%. This graph shows what the monthly totals of people I've assisted looks like. As you can see, in the first 4 months, it was a range of about 1 to 4 people. And since then, it has gone from between a range of 5 to 7 people. And it's not just helping one person either, because all these individuals are most likely seeking help from their friends, neighbors, and relatives as well. So every time I help one person, it could help multiple people within their social circle as well. So while it says 49 people have been helped, if each person is only relying on one person for help, all of a sudden that becomes 100 people that I've helped with transportation. This kind of breaks down where people are reaching out to me trying to find rides. In the past year, I've had one individual from each of the towns of New Boston, Candia, Deerfield, Raymond, Sandown, Hampstead, Atkinson, and Plastow. I've had 2 from the towns of Ware, Goffstown, and Derry, and Danville, 3 from the towns of Bedford and Salem, 4 from Hooksett, 6 from Londonderry, and 13 from Manchester. And this is how people have been getting connected to me. 20% come from transportation services, where they reach out to a transit service for help. And even though they can't meet their needs, they'll connect them with me to help find them other services that can. Outreach events that I've attended throughout the region, I'll either meet with people directly who need rides or meet with organizations that work with people who need rides. Other mobility managers, sometimes people will reach out to mobility managers in different regions when they live in my region, so then they'll get them connected with me. Health and human service organizations, mostly from the connections I've been making this past year, building this coordinated network. And the outreach materials that I talked about earlier, a lot of people have gotten in touch with me through that, and then the online resources that I've been building throughout the region this past year. This kind of breaks down where people are needing to go. 49% live in the region and just need to get somewhere else within the region. Its most common circumstances are medical appointments in Manchester, Derry, Bedford, and Windham. 18% live in the region and need transportation outside the region while staying in New Hampshire. These include medical appointments to Concord, Lebanon, and Exeter, as well as for education at the UNH campus in Durham. And then 5% need transportation out of state mainly to Massachusetts, also for medical appointments in Boston and Haverhill. And then 28% didn't give me a specific destination. They just wanted some sort of resource and support that can help them get around their community to meet their daily needs, just medical appointments, but also shopping, grocery shopping, and recreation. Looking back on the work I've done, I can remember one instance where an older woman in Manchester reached out to me because she needed a ride to her COVID booster appointment, and she was too old to drive herself. She lives in the west side of Manchester. So I got in touch with the Manchester Health Department on where she could get her COVID booster shot. I also got in touch with the Caregivers, which is a volunteer driver program based in Manchester. So she was able to get her ride free of charge to the COVID booster appointment, free of charge for both the transportation and the booster. And now she's going to keep using that service for other purposes, such as shopping and other medical appointments. With that being said, this doesn't mean that every person I've worked with has been able to find transportation. There's a lot of challenges depending on where people need to go, such as people trying to get to Lebanon for medical appointments, because there's really is no sort of service existing that can get people straight to the Dartmouth Medical Center up there, and also services that need to take them down to Massachusetts. There has been successes in the past where a volunteer driver program has gotten people to Boston, but it isn't always a consistent success. So while it's great that I'm helping so many people, there still is a need and a demand for transportation and needs that aren't being met. So looking at what's ahead in this next year, I'm working on creating a work plan for the fiscal year of 2024 that will be presented to the RCC and get feedback from them. I will also continue working with municipalities on updating their websites to have more transportation related content. Conduct surveys to identify needs. As mentioned before, I've been working with the Hand in Hand Senior Center in Ware, and we're in the starting process of creating a survey to learn more about senior needs in the town of Ware. Supporting immigrant elders. I also mentioned that we did a listening session back in June where elders shared their experiences of aging in New Hampshire. And now we're looking at ways that we can address the issues that they shared. Exploring new avenues in promoting transportation. This can be attending new outreach events, putting out new creative content, anything that gets people onto transit services, and assisting in the development of a statewide transit resource website. It's going to be called Keep New Hampshire Moving, and it's been talked about extensively with the State Coordinating Council for the better part of the past year. Basically, this will be the one-stop location throughout the entire state of all transportation services, helping people get to where they need to go. At the last SEC meeting, they mentioned that this is aiming for a launch at the beginning of next year. We'll see what happens, but the work I'll be doing with this involves making sure all the information on transit in my region is accurate and up to date. And that's all I have to say. Any questions?
Nice job.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Would you be able to help if somebody was looking for transportation for commuting? Like if they were going from Manchester to Portsmouth for a job or something like that?
I wish I could. As far as I know, the best thing that they could do would be to use Commute Smart, which is where people do carpooling. But there is a gap in terms of east and westbound transportation in New Hampshire, and no such service currently exists that can get people from the Manch area to the Seacoast area. But that's one of the many needs that aren't being met in the state.
You might want to see if there's online questions.
Yeah.
Maybe stop share.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Other business. Yeah, I just point out that not sure if people realize it, but we can only have a quorum if there are enough people here at the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Just pointing that out. Anything else?
Yeah, Bruce, just a plug. Next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. in Goffstown is the final Gasset hearing. Final Gasset hearing in our region and the final Gasset hearing in the state. So 7 PM, it's at Fire Station number 18, which is on Church Street in Goffstown. So yeah, next Wednesday night, the 25th, please come out and have your say on the draft 10-year plan if you're so inclined.
Is that the fire station?
Fire Station number 18. Which I
Church
believe
Street.
is on Church Street in Goffstown.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn? Even though we don't really need one.
Thanks, everybody, for your time. Hope to see you here at SNHPC next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.